Hello and welcome to Board Game Opinions. I'm Mark Windle.
I'm Sarah Hillier.
In this episode we're taking an in-depth look at Anachrony by Mind Clash Games. So, Anachrony is a thematic Euro, I guess is the best way to put it, about an asteroid is going to hit the world capital in the future, and so you want, at the point that happens, all the people of Earth to move from the capital to your home area and you become the ruling faction. But also related to that, you can actually do time travel in this, which is really important because it allows you to request goods from the future, which we'll explain in a second. So, this is fairly standard with the main normal worker placement board. You get all your general sort of normal stuff, gain resources, build buildings, recruit workers, and then some other more specialist things to this. How do you find the way the main board works as far as how tight is it, what actions are taken and stuff?
I do find it quite tight in relation to when we just play it as a two-player. Obviously, you've played it more,
yeah.
And I could imagine that it gets worse at that point, because the main things that you're going to be wanting to do every turn is gain workers or people and build buildings.
Yeah. And
there's only two really in each spot, unless you go to the higher up in the board where you have to pay more resources to be able to do it.
Basically, what happens is at the point when one of these spots is taken, so there's two spots available to build buildings. That's in 2 and 3. There's 3 and more player. Once you hit the maximum number in that, you can then use these upper spaces to also take those spots, but you have to then pay extra water to be able to take them. So they act as like a general neutral that can cover all 3 of these ones. But yeah, they're on to a huge amount of spots.
Yeah, so it does get very tight, and the amount of resources that you need, even just people, to be able to build things, it can be a bit of a struggle to actually get everything that you need. What
do you think to the fact that there's different worker types, essentially 4 different ones? Well, there's 3 and then there's a genius which counts as all 3 workers essentially. How do you find with the fact that the different workers have different abilities? Some workers are better at taking particular action spaces or others.
I find that quite good, because otherwise you could just go and get the geniuses to do everything. But where you have different benefits for different ones, it's like on the building one, if you have one of the workers like with a cog symbol, you get a little bit of a discount. Yeah. So it makes it a little bit more varied in relation to what worker that you need to. The
geniuses do get those discounts if you take them as that particular role, but the geniuses can't be used for other specific things where you request workers in the future and stuff, and it's a lot harder to get hold of a genius.
Very hard to get hold of one.
Also, I mean, the main thing that sort of drives it, these are meant to be like the Outlands almost to extent, because to go there with your normal workers, you have to send your exosuit dude, which you have to pre-plan and work out how many you think you're going to use this turn, because you have to power them up with these essentially reactor power energy cores, and so how do you find with the fact that you can only use them on there, and that little bit of, I think I'm going to use 3 this turn, but I might be blocks off, so I might end up wasting resources?
That is frustrating, but then again, that is the part of the game. You have to kind of play your opponent to see what they're going to do and make sure that you can actually do your own as well. These miniatures are great.
Yeah. Sadly, they aren't in the standard edition. You have to buy the separate X-Suit Commander pack.
I would say it's worth it, because like your little workers, you just slot them in the top, so it's like they've gone inside it to pilot it. Yeah. And all obviously the miniatures are different. They relate to your different factions, and I like these. They're good. They're a good quality. Yeah. But in relation to how many you can actually put out, with the faction that I was playing, I need a lot of these reactor tokens to be able to power up my suits, and especially once other things happen in the game, some hexes are taken away. Yes. It then becomes quite expensive to put suits out, but you need to keep doing it because you need to get the resources. You need to get like your different cubes. You need to get your people and then do your buildings and everything.
You definitely need to plan for that point when you're going to lose those. Yes. Some factions do get an advantage for doing that, and it does make it feel sometimes they're slightly easier to play because of it. I know also some buildings help you with getting hold of reactor cores, but there is a feeling that, like, if they don't come up, they don't come up.
Yes.
There are other ways on the board to get hold of them, but then it's going to be more than one step process to get there. Like, you might have to trade up here for reactor cores. That means you've got to take an action to do there. So you've spent another reactor core to send somebody to get maybe up to 2 reactor cores. So it feels inefficient. But I mean, yeah, that's part of the game.
Yeah.
So the other the other half of the game is your own personal faction board, which is meant to be essentially your area where you're getting the people to travel to. And this kind of comprises of the buildings you've got throughout the game that you have to pay for, a few things, and also how you go about refreshing your workers. So, I mean, how do you find, like, do you like the way, or any thoughts on how the workers get refreshed?
It can be quite of a struggle to get all of your workers refreshed, because you have the different factions, it's different things. So on the one that I was playing, I'm able to move this track down here. We won't go into it, but if I go too far down the other end, and then I need to go it again, people are then going to start dying.
Yes.
But then I need water to be able to then pay it up to then sort of go the other way. And commodities in this are stretched.
Tight. It's a very it's very tight. All resources really.
Yeah, so it's a very fine balancing game on this. So in relation to your workers coming back exhausted, that can be tricky, because then you really need to plan your next move. Yeah,
basically your workers come back, once you've used them, they go to the exhausted pool at the start of the round. Generally, there's a few things that stop that, but if they're particularly specialised in stuff. But if they do, you can either essentially pay water to be nice, and then they all come back. So you get all your workers back in one, you're not paying them one at a time. But they all can either come back happy, and you get actually helps you bonus points, but then each time you do that, you need to pay more water. Or you can essentially do it the nasty way with the whip, and you start losing victory points as time goes on. So there's a balance between that. And I'm not sure how I find with the fact that it's an action if you want to do the nice way. So it's going to cost you 1 time round going round. So that can set you on the bad foot, as opposed to whipping them is a free action. I guess it has to be a free action, because if you don't have any workers to pay for the workers, you can't do it, and therefore you wouldn't be able to get any workers back in, so it wouldn't make sense. But maybe it's a bit of a disadvantage, the fact that you've got to use a worker to do the good version. How do you find with the way you get all the buildings around the board, how do you find that affects the game as more buildings go down?
I like the way that you get more buildings, because obviously they all do have different benefits to them, but you need to balance out getting enough workers to utilise your buildings as well. Especially on some of the buildings that we've had, you use a worker, but instead of them actually coming back to you, they actually die, so you actually do sacrifice them. I got into a little bit of a tricky situation with them when we were last playing, because I had quite a lot of buildings that I had to sacrifice people on. Probably shouldn't have actually built them, but so I was very tight on people, and that really did affect my game.
I'd say the main set of builds are kind of on the top, which will go on to this, is the ones that let you travel back in time, which is important, because this is essentially the timeline, and you travel across it. And it affects what super projects and stuff are available. These are super projects. They're basically like really good buildings that are really hard to build, and you need to gain breakthroughs, which are these symbols, to build them. But well, I mean, the main thing with this, and to try and set it a little bit apart from the games, is the fact that you can gain goods from the future.
Yes.
But you have to pay them back.
You do.
And how do you find that? Do you find it works or not?
I find it does work, especially early on in the game, when you think, right, that's what I want to do. I really need to do that. So you can use your little tokens, and you can pick whether you want like 2 water, you can have other resources, and then you put them down on this track, and you get them straight away. But you then need to make sure that you actually do pay them back, because you then...
It's like at the start of every turn, we see who's got the most on any one of these. These are individual time periods. If they do, there's a dice you roll, and it tells you how many you get stuff to... I can't remember what they're called.
Warning triangles. We're calling that. We're calling warning triangles.
Essentially, and if you get a certain amount, then you've damaged the space time and whatever. And you get one of these, which is sort of like a building that is it's negative points in the game. You can pay it off, but it takes a building slot, and yeah, it's a bad thing, and you could keep getting them, because if you're not paying off stuff, you could get several of them, and they're just going to filter your board, and when you have to literally sacrifice a person to get rid of this, that's not right. It's paradox tokens, because that's a paradox. That makes more, it makes more sense.
I kind of like warning triangles.
But yeah, it does work, and it's an interesting mechanic. It does feel like a loan system, essentially, but with an interesting way of coming. But I suppose it goes with it. So once you hit this point here, the asteroid hits the supercapital, and the game changes, and you start blocking up. Well, these spaces then become better, but once they're used, they can't be taken again. So it tightens this board up a lot, and there's a few other minor effects. Do you like that in the game, or what do you think to that change in the game? Does it change it much for you?
It makes it a bit more panicky, because you're going through the game, you're like, right, I've got time to do this and this and that, and then all of a sudden things have disappeared.
Yeah.
And if you haven't been able to get in there first, you then can't use it. Yeah. Or you then have to start using the neutral spaces up here, which is then going to cost you more. Yeah. So it does become a little bit, you do what I found, that I started to worry a little bit and panic a little bit and think, right, I need to go there, I need to go there. And then I'd be like, oh, no, I should have done that instead, and should have done it this way. But then Mark would have then done something completely different and would have blocked me off from doing it if I hadn't have done that. So it does give it a little bit of urgency once the asteroid has hit.
It makes it even tighter in 2-player, and it makes it especially tight in 3 and 4. I mean, 3-player use the same side of the board, so there's the same number of action spaces. So if you think 2-player's tight, 3's even worse. But yeah, I mean, it's different. It's definitely something, and it also links with your faction, because then it gives you, every faction has a particular way of scoring at that point for combinations and resources. You can do one big, which is what this section for tells you. You can then put a work up there and take this action. It scores a lot of points, because a lot of the points this come from a lot of different ways. Do you find that, I mean, how do you find the point scoring when it's covering so many different things?
I like the way that it does cover so many different things, because you can, if you're going down one route and then you get blocked off on here, you can quickly change and go down another route to get different points. So it doesn't feel like if you've gone down one road and then you've exhausted it, or your opponent is then going down the same road, that your game's over and it's done and dusted, which it happens on some other games. So I quite like the way that you can get points from different areas, and like all your buildings are worth points.
Doing like paying off stuff from the past is actually worth. Gives you a lot of points. Yeah. You get points for being a better person with your workers. You get points from all the super projects. There's endgame scoring for majorities of points. Yeah, there's lots of different. I mean, there's even some buildings paying resources can give you points every turn. Yeah. There's a lot of ways of scoring different points. I do like that you've got plenty of options, and you need to try and not do the same thing as somebody else, because especially if you get blocked and stuff.
Yeah.
The problem is a lot of these still rely on you getting decent buildings to use in your, like, to build an engine, even a small engine. This isn't really an engine building game, but it's happy to have a couple. It's good to have a few that link together to power up every turn. But if you're getting blocked out of the spaces, or you've just timed it wrong by one turn because you haven't got your workers ready or whatever, you can be set quite quickly, and there's not much you can really do about it. I mean, you've said that you find the game length a bit long. I
do find it a bit long.
I would probably agree. I think it feels like half an hour too long or something like that.
Yes, I mean, it feels like it's a bit of a slog up until when the asteroid hits, and then you get to a bit
cliff.
Yeah, and then it goes a bit panicky. You're like, oh my god, I've got all of this to do, and I've got not enough time to do it. And by the time that you've moved down like your time track, you can then maybe do one of these super projects back here. Yeah. So then you have to make sure you've got the yellow buildings to then go back enough. And
have these ready so to pay for it. It's a lot of coming. The thing with like getting a whole super truck, which makes it hard as well, because you still need to take a building action to build even one historically. Yeah. So it's like a multi-step process. So I need the resources, then I need to go back in time so I can put my token here, so I can then take a building action, just so that you can take a super project. So it's kind of, and if it's really running out of spots, can be quite hard.
Yes.
What do you think to the level of interaction in this game?
For a Euro game, I think it's quite of a good level of interaction because you still need to keep an eye on what your opponent is doing because you need to be able to figure out what they're doing so that you can make your turn fit around that as well, or so that you know that you're going to get there just before them. So for some, obviously, people playing Euro games, they like just to have their head down and just gather stuff and do all of that. So you get that in this game as well because you've got your own board, which doesn't affect anybody else, and you can then just put your people down and you then take the actions on there. So for me, for a Euro game, I think the interactions is quite balanced.
I would probably slightly disagree because I find that the only real way you interact in this game are the tightness of these boards, and because it's like for worker placement, there are many spots. You end up, the further you get into the game, the more solitary the game gets because the more you just end up using stuff on your own board and doing a little bit up here. I mean, there is some like stuff with you pick these are hidden picking because on these tracks you get different bonuses and negatives depending on how many you take and where they're placed, so you kind of loop round for the first player. So if they've chosen 2, the third spot might be a negative spot. So you're thinking, oh, they're going to choose 2, and I'll take just one, and I might get away with it. Or there's bits and pieces, but I dislike the feeling that the further the game goes through, the more I just don't really care what everybody else is doing because I don't feel like I can do enough to affect them. I don't want it to take that, but because especially once these spots are like turned over and blocked off, I can't really do anything at all because we don't really need to do anything. We've already got our own scoring engine, but I guess some people are like that, some people won't. So the main thing, does it capture the theme of being a worker placement game and there is a timeline stuff and the world's going to end and the asteroid's going to hit and stuff like that?
I would say yes, it does. I would say that it does capture the theme well in relation to these types of games that we've played previously, and I do like the theme of it. Just for me, it's just a little bit too long, which then makes me then go, I'm getting a bit bored, so then I don't end up liking it too much. But I think it does really capture the theme of it.
For me, again, I'm probably going to disagree slightly. I'm still left with the feeling this just feels like a bit like just a lone system. I get that the game changes, and they've done well for trying to do it, but I just think that they could have hopefully captured it a bit better. It does just feel a little bit like a lone, and that's just me. It doesn't quite feel like I'm doing stuff in time, which is what obviously with the name Anachrony and everything is meant to be about. I mean, yeah, like the idea of the fact when the asteroid hits does tighten up the game, so you does feel like there's 2 parts to the game. I won't say 2 halves because the end bit's much shorter than the rest of it, but even so, it just doesn't quite mesh as well as something like Dungeon Lords or Tricarian. I think they make me feel like I'm doing that better than this does. So, we said component quality is good. I mean, the miniature's definitely worth it. The cardboard's thick. I really wish the buildings all wouldn't have names.
Yeah.
I think that doesn't link with the thing. I've just got something that gives me water. That's great. Could that have been named? Because I think that would have got me more in with the theme. If everything had a name, it was like, oh yeah, I can see that. This is a particular type of time machine that needs a water power and all that. I don't know, but something just to bring that in a little bit further because these are so important as they sit around. It'd be nice if they had some way of doing it better so that they weren't just, well, this one gives me a cube of this colour. Because I mean, all these resources are known, but much like a lot of games, that just ends up being turquoise cube. I mean, I think that's uranium, gold, and titanium and whatever. But a lot of the time, it ends up kind of pass me a purple cube, please. Yeah. Do you have any other thoughts on likes and dislikes?
I do. One thing we haven't talked about a little bit, which I do actually quite like on this, is getting these different tiles. Because you go onto this base and you roll these dice.
You set one and roll one.
You can set one and then you roll the other, and they help like with the super projects. But it gives it a little bit of chance, which with people that have watched our reviews previously, you know that I'm not a very big Euro gamer. So where you get the little bit of chance and a little bit of like risk in it, I quite like that.
You quite like that?
Yeah.
A hardened Euro player, but I'd rather have certainty. Yeah, it's true. It's quite. Any other thoughts? No, I mean, I like a lot of the game of what it is. I think my biggest problem, which I think goes to the game, that I think it just feels a bit bloated. I think there's almost a little bit too much going on in it, and I think it's not a tight game. This take your spaces type that there's so many little bits. Maybe it's because it's also a lot of ways scoring points, but it feels bloated, a little bit slow, a little bit ponderous at times. You need working out ways to actually score can be not quite hard to do, and it's like it's very hard to set up a particular strategy because you'll score so many. You can get like lots of little points from lots of places as opposed to I'm going to score big on here and here. It's not like there's lots of options. You're going to maximise 2 of them. It's you end up picking lots of bits out, a little bit of parts, like lots of parts. So it just doesn't flow as well for me. I'd like to be able to maybe just plan a little bit better at times. Maybe I'm just not very good. But that bloat is, I think, is the reason why at times it just feels slow and it can be ponderous, and then it does feel like it goes a little bit too long. I mean, your action turns on particularly slow. You're not waiting a huge amount of time for the players, but you can have times where people are looking through the different buildings and stuff and so much to get, and you're just kind of sat there going, I can't really plan much more because they turn could affect me on here.
But for me, where I don't, I'm not a hard Euro gamer. For me, that's fine because it's a case of I then don't have to think about what I'm going to do on my 5th turn or even my 4th turn. I literally can wait and go, right, okay, Mark's done this, right, so then I can react to this. So I'm probably more of a reactive player than thinking about what's going to then be up and coming. So that's probably why. So
you take the punches as they come as opposed to try and advise. Yeah, because with stuff like, because the buildings, you're essentially at a lot of the time limited by what buildings are available to buy all the time. The projects you can sort of play towards those, somebody might steal it before you get hold of it, but because you can't really control what buildings are there, and there is quite a variation of what some of them do and what strategies, you do have to kind of think, but you just might not get the right combination. So, what rating would you give out of 10?
So for me, in relation to the component quality and everything like that, I'm going to actually give this game a 5 because I think it is a really good game. Components are great. For me, it's just a little bit too long, and as we have been talking, there are a lot of different things going on, and for me it just gets a little bit too panicky towards the end and a little bit too tight. So I go for a 5.
And for me, I would give it a 6. I think underneath it, there's a solid game, but I think it could have just done with a little bit more play, just a little bit tightening up of it, and if you just work to, like I said, things like the text on the buildings would have, just to bring that theme in for me. The theme doesn't just quite mesh well enough for me for a game that is essentially set out to be a thematic Euro, one of those that mesh the two really well. If it isn't going to succeed at that, then it's got a problem, because it's fine. You expect with Euros like this that there's going to be lots of different bits because they have to work with a theme. But if they don't quite mesh with me, then you just end up with a lot of little bits all over the place rather than something creating a scene for me. But all in all, still a solid game and definitely worth a try if you've got the time. So, I've been Mark Windle.
I'm Sarah Hillier.
And this has been Board Game Opinions. Thank you very much all.